Welcome to another Power Monkey podcast where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn, and on today's episode, we interview Danielle Brandon. Danielle is a veteran of the CrossFit community, having finished 10th in the CrossFit Games back in 2019. She has made a recent move to go and train with some other great female CrossFit athletes down in Las Vegas. This year has been an incredible start. She finished third at the West Coast Classic just a few years ago, leading up to the Games. Talk a little bit about her background, having been a collegiate pole vaulter, having gymnastics as a background, and now what the season is looking like as she leads into the Games. It was great getting to know Danielle, and hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Danielle, how you doing? Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm great. How are you guys?
Doing good. So excited to have you, to get to know you a little bit more. And, I want to jump right in with a deep question here. Maybe one of the most important questions for us in this community is, what does CrossFit mean to you and why do you do it?
Oh my gosh. I don't think I asked this question. I mean, I grew up doing sports my whole life. So CrossFit really was something that helped me stay out of trouble. Right? Like growing up, when I had a lot of free time, it was easy to get into trouble and do bad things. So CrossFit was there for me to kind of keep me grounded, give me something to do. And then really transitioning from track and field in college to CrossFit, it kept me on a good path, and kept me focused. And I was glad to have CrossFit after doing college sports, because I think a lot of college athletes, they end and then they're like, oh my gosh, who am I? What am I doing? They don't know where to turn to. They're over fitness because we've been doing it our whole life. And we were kind of it almost felt like a job. I'm sure every athlete has felt that kind of a job. So CrossFit was a good transition to kind of keep that going. Yeah,
for sure. And it makes perfect sense to me why you're so good at CrossFit, being a former collegiate track and field athlete. I mean, you guys are incredible at that level, track and field wise. It's amazing to watch you guys, what you do. What events were you a part of?
I was a 400 runner and a pole vaulter, and I really transitioned into just focusing on pole vault near the end of my career.
Was it because 400 meters is probably the hardest race to run? Would you agree with that?
Okay. It's maybe not the hardest. I would argue 800 is probably the hardest.
Yeah.
Because what we do, but for 2 laps, the really good, they're running our splits for 2 laps, which is it's crazy, which I could not imagine doing. And then, and pole vaulter and 400 meter runner is such an odd combo.
Yeah, it is.
Never see that. So the training was, it's really hard for the 400. You have to train that every day, but it's really hard to do both those practices in a day. So slowly.
Well, pole vault, I did a little bit of pole vaulting. I mean, I never made it off. I hate to say this because it sounds dirty, but I've never made it off the training pole.
Yes.
But it is technical. To me, it's similar to, the technique and timing of a snatch, perhaps, or a muscle up. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Oh, it really is. That's why most pole vaulters were gymnasts, because it takes so much body awareness. I mean, the whole, you can't get away with a lot. You can't muscle your way through it. You really, a lot of technique work, really does.
Yeah, that was going to be actually my question, because when I was in college, the pole vaulters would do 2 things. They would come and train with us in the gym and use our ropes to just get some timing drills down. And they would also come in to recruit. They would come in to try to recruit the gymnasts to leave gymnastics and join the track and field team. And I'm curious if you had any gymnastics background yourself. Were you recruited at all, or was this something that kind of fell in your lap?
Yeah, so I was a gymnast for most of my life. And then when I got to college, or when I got to high school, that's when I kind of quit. I was just really overwhelmed with it. Then I kind of went back to it for a little bit. But ultimately, I mean, when you're a gymnast, that's the only sport you're doing. And I had really loved track and field and swimming and diving. And there was no way that I could do gymnastics and one of those things. So I kind of had to choose, and ultimately I was able to do track and field and swimming and diving. So I was mainly recruited for those sports. But in college, definitely, they were like, oh, she was a gymnast. Like maybe we could use her for pole vault and.
So you didn't do pole vaulting in high school? Or was something you actually started to pick up in college?
I did it in high school. I was absolutely terrible. I hated it. I was recruited for the 400 ultimately, but they saw that I was athletic and they were like, okay, she was a decent pole vaulter in high school, like not great, but she looks athletic. I think we can work with her.
Nice. Nice. Well, one of the things that you mentioned is that CrossFit kept you out of trouble. Now, when did you come across CrossFit? I think you're 25 now, right? So when was it that you needed to be kept out of trouble?
So I want to say it was like my sophomore year of high school. So this is when I kind of like, I quit gymnastics, which was taking most of my time, right? We were doing 8 hours a day, 2-a-days. So that kept me out of trouble very much. But when I quit that, right, I didn't really have like a direction of like what I wanted to do. And I had so much more free time. But I was really lucky to then meet my high school, like fitness, I don't even know what the PE coach. He was a CrossFit, and he was like, hey, Danielle, like you should come check out our CrossFit gym someday. And I did. And they like made me they seriously wrecked me. They made me do and they made me do Filthy 50. I thought my elbows were broken. Yeah, like I thought my elbows were broken because they were like, this girl's fit. She can do it.
Jeez.
I know. I was dead.
What kind of special?
You fell in love with CrossFit.
Yeah, right. I wonder what kind of special event was going on that day where they were doing Fran and Filthy 50 in the same day.
Right. So I think it was like, what year was this? This was like a tiny box. Like it was like garage size CrossFit. So I think it was open gym, like everyone was just hanging out. I don't think there was any structure at that point.
I feel like they just wanted to test you.
They did. Yeah. They were like, oh, can you do a muscle up? And like had someone do a kipping muscle up. And I think I did like a strict half kipping muscle up. And I was like, I can do it, So
nice. Nice. Well, you mostly answered my question earlier, but I wonder, you said you got into it and it helped you stay out of trouble at some point, but you kept doing it. So why now? Why do you still do CrossFit now?
Now, why do I do it? Well, I think after college, I didn't know where I was going to go with it. Like, I was like, okay, like I do local comps. I do pretty well. I would make regionals. But I ultimately just like didn't know where I was going with it. And then when I had first made the games, I was like, okay, like I can have a shot at this to do this like full time and be pretty good at it. But ultimately now I do it because I just love it. I think it's fun to train every day. It's fun to get to be better at something every day because there's so many aspects to it. That's why I loved gymnastics so much, was because there's so many different areas and events that every day there was something to work on. Whereas I think pole vault, I just did not have the same passion for it because it's ultimately like this one routine over and over again. And so it's really monotonous and it's really it was really hard for me to fall in love with it because I ultimately got bored of it. Mm-hmm. Whereas CrossFit, it's like, okay, this one thing didn't go great, or maybe I didn't improve on that today, but I'm going to be better at this. You know what I mean? There's there's so much to be better at. And when you're as competitive and a perfectionist like me, you're constantly I need to be better at this. I need to be better at everything. I want to be good at everything. So that kind of just keeps you going,
Absolutely. I think that's probably why all of us that are addicted to it are addicted. Yeah. There's so many things, just improving your time by half a second for whatever workout or whatever it may be. But I have to mention, talking about gymnastics, Dave, I told you we made it to the Olympic trials last night, Sunday, saw the female team be named. It was incredible, amazing. Ella had a great time, and she's, been excited, and something she's going to remember for the rest of her life. So I just had to throw that in there because
I'm so glad you guys went.
Yeah, I'm motivated now to get my floor routine down, Dave, so I can do that for everyone at
I
Power
think
Monkey
you
Camp.
owe me, Danielle. I don't know if you know this, but Chad and I normally compete during the Open against each other, and the last one I beat you, and you still owe me a
ribbon
kind
routine,
of,
I think.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed
Yeah,
to do. You're supposed
yeah.
to do a rhythmic routine at next camp. So thank you for reminding me, and it'll be set up in the fall. So you'll be doing a Will Ferrell-esque floor routine come end of September.
I'm telling you, I'm a little bit more inspired to make that happen now, just from being at the Olympic trials. So I'm good to go. Good to go.
I'm glad you went, man. I'm glad you went.
Yeah.
It was the first Olympic trials I missed in 20 years, so I'm glad you went.
Yeah, I was wondering. So, any ribbon routines in your past there, Danielle?
None. Floor not favorite, let me tell you. Well, floor was one of my favorites, but the dancing part, I never could get into.
You follow any of the gymnastics now? You check out any of Simone Biles stuff that she's.
I always see her everywhere on my Instagram, on Facebook, but I didn't even watch any of the trials or keep up with any of that. The only thing I heard was Simone Biles fell on beam. You're at the gym and someone's like, oh, she fell. I'm like, if she got 5th place, this girl is still getting picked to she's getting to be on the team.
How amazing that she fell. She probably had the worst meet of her life that Sunday night, and she still was ahead of everyone. I mean, what does that say about how far ahead she is from everyone else in the field? It's pretty incredible. That you
can be that far ahead in a sport.
Yeah. So Chad, just be grateful that you got to witness that level of greatness in person. It's like watching Jordan or,
Yeah, that's exactly what I felt when I was there. Yeah. And knowing that she, had a hard night, and it wasn't, extraordinary like her, but it just made it even more apparent how special she is, that she still won like that. But I was kind of excited that she, kind of didn't do great, because I think that's going to mean she's going to do even better at the Olympics.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? She kind of saved it a little bit. So
she's a superstar.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing up gymnastics, Chad.
We can
continue.
Of course. Well, speaking of competition, Danielle, you've come off a recent competition, going into another one, I believe, here pretty soon. What are your thoughts on kind of that? Well, we can talk about competition in general, but specifically about someone really peaking at the right time. You know what I'm saying? It's real easy, for me, for example, in 2008, for sure, I felt like I peaked hardcore at the Olympic trials. And so I never really got back to where I needed to be to perform my best at the Olympics. So what are your thoughts about that? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, working with a new coach, he's definitely very helpful in that aspect. Working with Justin, he was constantly reminding us, and even Bethany, she's really great at this. She's like, this isn't the time to peak. We don't, even though it's so close to the games, it was so hard to not want to just be the best and feel at your best at semis. But I don't know. I think we're handling it well. I mean, we're really close to the games, and we're ramping up, and we'll be ready for the games. I think, I have execution errors that I think I'm glad happened at semis, because rather happened there than at the games. But yeah, that definitely is a hard thing, especially when semis, I feel like there's so much more pressure at semis than at the games. Really, I just want to make the games. I want to make the games. So I need to be on top of everything at semis. And so I think a lot of athletes can fall under that pressure and train really, really hard and kind of overtrain just for semis. And then by the games, they're kind of banged up and kind of burnt out. But I think the Underdogs crew is on the right path to peaking at the game. Sure.
Good. Yeah, it's a luxury to be good enough to where you don't have to, go 100% all out, when you're qualifying. For me, I don't think that was ever the case. I had to make sure I qualified. So I had to do what I needed to do to make sure that I'm on the team. So it's a little bit tough, but it's also a little bit of maturity too, understanding where you're at, what you need to do hold back where you can, but get after it if you need to. But I'm excited, Dave, and I know we've talked about this a lot with some of the recent guests, and just excited to watch all of these, girls and guys going into the games this year. It's such an incredible field. I mean, how do you feel about all the competitors that you're up against this year, Danielle?
So it's crazy. I was talking to this with Tola just yesterday, how at West Coast, I don't think there was one rookie. Like, even I don't think on the women's side, no, there was not one rookie games athlete on the women's side or the men's side, which is kind of crazy. Like, we had all been to the games at least twice, I think. So like, just alone at West Coast, it was just stacked. And I mean, I wonder, looking at the other semis, I can't even think of one rookie except like Jason Hopper. I'm sure there was more rookies, but I feel like from all the semis, it's a lot of like veteran games athletes that made it. Like, it's a solid group of athletes. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good field. I'm happy. I'm glad that it's a stacked field, because then you get to compete with the best. And I feel like your placement will be really like solid and legit, Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about what happened at West Coast Classic? You mentioned some potential errors that you felt you had in a couple events. There's a couple that kind of stood out. One was maybe the regional event finale from 2017. It looked like you and Denny Spiegel were head to head right at the end with the D-ball. And you had her, even on the last rep, you were ahead of her, and she beat you by, 0.35 seconds, whatever it was. Did you feel like you had given everything you had at that moment, or do you feel like you kind of maybe misstepped or stepped the wrong foot, or what do you think kind of happened at the end of that?
I mean, like, that one, coming from the previous event not going great, I just wanted to full send and give everything I had. And I did, but I believe maybe like next time I should be more aware of, like, we do have a chip timer on our ankle. Like, I should have thought of that before the event. Like, hey, in the end, if it is close, like, reach with that foot. Like, I feel like for me, even like doing track, I'm so my friend who did track with me was watching, and she's like, at the end, like, you did the classic, like, track and field, like, that, like, chest finish, like, you would have had her if it was like track standards, but just definitely should have like thought of that, and it probably would have worked in my favor a little more. But also maybe like how she finished, like standing up and moving.
Yeah.
I should try next time. Like, I don't know, I feel like just being in the game a little longer, you kind of like are aware of those things more. But I'm happy it happened, because in an event like that at the games, we can sit down and like talk about all those things, like just something to be aware of and think about. But I don't think I think I physically did what I should have and full of, but just like little execution things in that event.
Yeah. And it seems like, being in this new training environment with the rest of the girls and your team in Vegas now gives you the ability to analyze and kind of bounce ideas off of Bethany or off of Kari and come to a conclusion as to, okay, what's best. Now, the three of you were top 3 in West Coast Classic. It was awesome to see. And I'm sure it was encouraging to you guys to say, okay, we trained together, we finished top 3, we're moving in the right direction. What has it meant to you as an athlete to be able to now train with 2 of the other best competitors in the field on a daily basis?
I think the biggest thing, which like we're slowly working on, but it's definitely like a confidence booster, like, they are some of the best. They're games veterans, and they have done amazing at the games for years. So I think it's just a really big confidence boost to be like, hey, like, I do these things in training with them, or like, I can beat them. Like, whereas before training alone, I was just like, I don't know how good I am compared to them. But now I like literally get like an everyday analysis of that, like, and it is really cool because I get to talk to Bethany and Kari a lot and ask them questions. And Bethany's a really good teacher. Like, the other day I was like, hey, like, how are you going to do these handstand push-ups? And she's like, like, you know, yourself as an athlete, like, you know what to do. You're probably going to do like a big set in the beginning and then like hang on. Like, it's cool that she kind of like knows me as an athlete and helps me out in that. You know what I mean? It's cool, rather than just being like, I don't know, like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, she's really helpful in like me figure out myself as an athlete, which is cool.
It's almost like a secondary coach being out there, especially someone, player coach kind of a thing, someone that's going through it with you. Did you have an active coach prior to getting to Vegas, or any teammates that you would be able to kind of use as a rabbit in training prior to getting to the situation you have now?
No. So I had training partners back in like what year? Like 16, 17. But like, I wasn't even going to the games or anything. That was when I was just making regionals. And then in 2019, kind of, but not really. No one consistent. But no coaches ever until Justin. Yeah.
Does it make you feel like you can achieve, I don't know, does it open up a whole new world to you in terms of because physically, you know, you've made it to the games twice before, you've made it to regionals a bunch. Obviously you have physical tools to get there, but does this training environment suddenly say, okay, my goals have now changed? It's not just about getting to the games, not just about participating or finishing 10th and being excited about that. Does this new environment say, you know what, let me change what my goals are now, and now getting onto that podium, potentially winning, is now actually a possibility?
Yeah, 100%. Like, before it was just that, like, I just want to get to the games. And then when I get to the games, I don't really care how I do, you know, like, I made the games good enough for me. And then really training with Justin and then going through like the open and quarters, it was like, hey, like look at where you are now and like how much better you're only going to be in years to come, like being on a program or being under a coach. So now we can actually make some good goals at the games now. Like, we know you're making it to the games. Like, we know that you've done that 3 years in a row. So now let's start looking at the games and what we want to do there, which is really cool. You know, you never like think you're going to, I don't know. I never thought I would be at this point. So it's really cool.
Do you have any specific goals that you can share with us for this particular games?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to be top 5. I think it's very realistic.
So top 5, that's well, one, just let me say how incredible it is that, you know, basically without a coach, somewhat on your own, you made it to regionals. I think at this point, I mean, I know there's not regionals really anymore, but at the point to when regionals were still going, I mean, it was incredible. Like, if you were able to qualify for regionals, you are an incredible athlete, right? At that point. Yeah. And so to be able to make it to the games without that is obviously just at another level. But what is it about you? What is your greatest strength, that may be a movement or a type of a workout that will help you get to the top 5? And maybe what is your greatest weakness that could potentially keep you from that?
So as like Justin and I like to talk, I think when it comes to my strengths and weaknesses, I think I'm like a pretty well balanced athlete. I don't think I look at any workout and I'm like, oh no, like this is going to be a bad workout. I don't believe I have a workout like that. I have weaknesses, but I think luckily, like it's just going to be middle of the pack. Like, I don't, there is an outstanding weakness to where I'm like, oh no, like this is going to be a huge detriment and I'm going to have to like climb back. Weaknesses though would probably be like that longer workouts. I'm just going to be like middle of the pack. So that might kind of set me back a little bit, but we're working really hard on that. And then I would say my strengths are just very like CrossFit, like OG CrossFit style workouts, ones with skill strength. And even in the longer workouts, I think if there is a skill piece, I'm going to be fine. And I think I'm really good at the power workouts, the really like short sprints, stuff like that, sprinting. I think those are some strengths of mine, the more athletic based ones.
Sounds like the strength of a 400-meter sprinter to me.
Exactly.
But, I mean, gymnast.
Yeah, a former gymnast for sure. But I don't know about you, Dave, but for me, I look at every CrossFit workout and think it's going to be a bad one. So So it's awesome to hear someone think, oh, this is no problem, you know, nothing wrong with this one. It's every single CrossFit workout for me, which I love.
Yeah.
The ruck run kind of stood out as something that from West Coast Classic that looked like it was a bit of the middle of the pack challenge for you. You're based in Vegas, so you were kind of home field advantage when it came to knowing the heat and how much of a factor that was going to play into it. But would you say that type of event would be something that would challenge you in the future, or is that kind of, you know, one of those ones that you're working on with Justin right now?
Yeah, it's weird. So when it comes to longer runs, like I'm not a bad runner. Like I did when we tested the trail run at the games, like I did really great. I did awesome. Like my time was up there compared to when the top 5 did it. When it comes to like, the longer trail runs, longer runs, I'm not a bad runner. I'm really great at those. But then for some reason, like you put a sandbag or like a heavy ass rep, like, I don't know what it is. Because I'm one of the like bigger, stronger athletes and I'm not a bad runner. So you'd think like I'd be good at that, but I don't know. I don't know what it is. My body tends to break down a lot after those. Like after that, my foot was like injured. Like I couldn't walk on my foot after that ruck run for the whole weekend. It was swelling up and I don't know what it is. But it's something we're more looking at for the future. You know, like that is a lot on your body to do a lot of sandbag running, vested running. And for me, we see that it really wrecks me. So I think for the future, we kind of talked about that and throwing in more consistently vested sandbag runs, you know. But it's one of those events I look at and I'm like, okay, this is going to be damage control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we're not like, oh no, like you're out.
Sure.
Okay, like, let's do what we can here. We know it's not going to be your best, but that's okay. Yeah.
An excuse I use for myself, since I'm supposed to be strong with the Olympic lifts and, you know, anything weightlifting related, like even 95 pounds and, you know, or 135, 30 clean and jerks for time or something. I mean, I hate doing light barbell work in CrossFit more than anything, even maybe more than running, as much as that surprises myself when I say that. But an excuse that I give myself is that I think it's because I'm so used to lifting heavy weights all the time, obviously. So even though I could lift 95 pounds with less than 25% of effort, my body doesn't know how to shut down to an extent to allow me to be efficient. Do you think there's any, I mean, I'm just making shit up right now, but do you think there's any truth to that? Maybe that's why the sandbag or the vest gets you, because you are big and strong and have that ability.
Yeah, maybe maybe just the efficiency and like the way I run I probably break down everything, you know, literally the efficiency and how I run goes to track. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Wasn't a great day either, but that's okay. Well, we learned a lot from the weekend and how to fuel and properly make sure I have enough energy. So we'll be ready for the games. So.
Yep. Well, what was your favorite workout?
Ooh. Well, probably I really liked the legless one, the thruster legless. And I really liked the handstand push-up, like torque sled one or whatever. Those two I really enjoyed. The legless one I really loved because when I did that one in practice, I did not finish. It was garbage. On the 3, I failed like the third one like 2 or 3 times. And then I finally got to the set of 2 legless and I failed the first one like 2 or 3 times, finally got one, and then like didn't even get the second one. So I just absolutely died and blew up. So it was really cool to like play my own game in that event and then come back and take second. So it was just like fun. It's fun when you're like only focused on yourself and you're just like really in the workout, not worrying about anything else. And then it you know, plays to your
works
out. So
yep.
Dave,
what's up, Chad?
I was just going to ask what you how you thought those workouts were programmed. How'd you feel about those?
I mean, anytime, a couple things that I noticed. One, anytime that you have a handstand, Danielle, the first time that I saw you recognized you was a couple years ago when you were doing one of the handstand walking events and you were crushing everybody and crushing even athletes in the field that were considered to have some of the best handstand walking in CrossFit. And I was like, I mean, where's this girl coming from? And does she have a gymnastics background? Because you don't have, the generic gymnastics body type. Someone's a little bit smaller. You really stood out as like, how is this possible? You're just a freak of nature on your hands.
She's doing 400-meter sprints on her hands. That's what
on her hands. Yeah. Yeah.
Repeats,
have you ever done that
right?
before? Have you ever done 400 meter on your hands?
I've done a football field. I think that's the farthest I've tried.
But you're excellent walking on your hands, not just good for a gymnast. And one of the things, I saw a video not that long ago of you doing kind of a portion of the handstand obstacle course, going up the steps and then down the incline, and then doing it forward and backwards and forward and backwards and kind of just back and forth.
Yeah.
Now, do you train that specifically? Was that just a fun game? Because to me, it's actually an important skill that people don't really know about, walking backwards, because there is actually value there in terms of just understanding what might be thrown at you later down the road in terms of, right now with handstand walking, it's just walking a straight line for the most part. But is that something you actually train, or was it kind of just a stupid human trick that you were showing off?
Well, so it's funny because when I first started CrossFit and we would do handstand walks, I would always want to walk backwards. I was like, this is so much easier, because I mean, how I look at it, I'm just on my hands and I'm literally falling backwards and like kind of catching myself. It's faster and it's easier and it doesn't hurt your shoulders as much. So it's funny, I like always wanted to walk backwards, and then I don't know, I was just like, as well as that as walking forward. And then we pulled out the handstand ramps and I was like, I kind of want to try backwards. So
that's super interesting, because really the big limiting factor for most people when it comes to handstand walking is the inability to get weight to travel forward, right? And that's why they are always tilting backwards. And like you throw an incline at someone that has poor shoulder mobility, and there's no way they're going to get up it unless they have like, big scorpion back or heavy shoes on or some way to get their weight traveling forward. But you were looking at that as saying, I might actually be able to walk faster if I walk backwards, as opposed to worrying about whether or not I can get the way forward. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Do you ever walk back? I feel like it's so much easier.
I mean, I do it just to play around with different variations, but I've never thought about using it as a faster route. Because to me, like, you also lose stability because you don't have your fingertips to kind of engage and control what's going on. But it definitely will be fast because all your weight's kind of already tipping in that direction. So if you can control it, it can be super fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you ever try to do it in a competition?
I know. I don't know if they would like allow that. I think at a local comp when I first started, I asked, I was like, can you walk backwards? And they were just like, like we're going to say no just because we don't know like what is, but
they should allow that. They should allow that.
It's a good question to ask. I think I will definitely ask that.
Yeah. So anything handstand related when I see you go. But the other thing that kind of impressed me was your muscle ups. Muscle up is not, ring muscle up specifically is not a women's gymnastics event. It's not something that you would normally be comfortable doing. I mean, rings is not a women's event. It's not something you normally jump on, but your muscle ups are very, very good in terms of not just technical side, but your finish position and everything. Is that something you just felt gymnastics naturally translated over in terms of understanding swinging technique? And it came fairly natural for you? Again, being a bigger athlete, it's not something that you would think you would be super strong at, but I'm just curious if the gymnastics kind of allowed you to be great at those.
I mean, I remember when I first started, what I struggled with was when I first started, whoever taught me, they were like, oh, I always do false grip. So I'd always do false grip, but we could never do more than like 2 or 3 because you fall out. What the heck? But then literally one day he was like, hey, I tried it without false grip. I can do it. Like, you should try it. And I tried it and I was able to do it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's like super random. I was like, why did we ever do this? But I think gymnastics helped a lot just with like the body awareness.
Sure.
And like, oh, hey, like if I think, whenever you were lifting flyaways, you always thought about like, okay, like see my toes first. It's kind of like that. Whenever
Same thing
with a muscle up, I'm like, see your toes first and then like pop your hips. It's just like being able to break.
This is me clapping into the microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for mentioning that, because you're saying the exact things that I would hope someone at your level is telling the people out there that are trying to think about muscle ups. So yeah. I love it. Seeing your toes, having a visual contact point, hugely important to be able to recreate reps, especially as you fatigue. Use that visual contact point, right? So as you're fatiguing, say, okay, as long as I can see my toes, I know my body is probably in a good position. It's one less thing to worry about, something you can recreate time and time again. I love that. The other thing you mentioned, it's something that I see all the time, even with some high-level competitors, is doing kipping muscle-ups in a false grip. I think this has been taught for years, and I think it's a huge disconnect between what we want to be thinking about on muscle-ups and what people are actually doing. And I'm going to just mention this for a second because I think it's important to note. Muscle-ups in the gymnastics world are a strict movement. It's not a kipping movement. In fact, the kipping variation of a muscle-up is called a front uprise, where it's all swing-based. So in my mind, as CrossFit evolved, it kind of turned into this merging of a strict movement in with a swinging movement. And you start to see people try to kip with a little bit of a false grip because they couldn't do a strict muscle-up strict. So we're using a little bit of kip, and it turned into more and more morphed or kind of mutated into this kipping variation where people were still using a false grip, where that's not what you want. We want no angles whenever we're swinging. We want curved shapes and straight lines. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're doing a kipping muscle up with a false grip, that is incredibly inefficient. Just like Danielle mentioned, you'll be able to do a couple of reps, but it's all going to be based on how strong your forearms are. That's the only limiting factor when it comes to being able, can I maintain a false grip? The rest of the entire movement goes out the window. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's hugely important. And I'm glad that you switched from doing it with a false grip to a neutral grip.
I love it.
Sorry about that. I had to mention. I love that you brought that up.
I'm glad.
Chad, how do you do your muscle ups? False grip or no false grip?
I'm not strong enough to maintain a false grip, Dave.
That's all right. That's fine.
I know it, but it's you talking about that. It makes me think we need to do a recording on just the disconnects in the CrossFit community, and that's certainly one of them.
That's a big one.
We can think of at least a handful more in gymnastics and weightlifting as well. But the big thing, like you said, Dave, is if you're in question of what's being taught or what you're trying to accomplish in any movement in CrossFit, I mean, I think you go straight to games level athletes and see what the reality of the movement is. The reality of the movement is these athletes are doing it at a high level. They're under fatigue. They've been, working out for however long through the games weekend. What are they doing? And it's probably they're doing it whether they realize it or not, because it's more efficient and it's more effective for that movement. It's like one of the things is should your wrist be all the way back when you're holding a bar overhead? Well, you look at any picture of any games athlete with the bar overhead and the wrist is all the way back, because it's going to take extra time and energy and effort to even think about keeping the wrist straight, right? Just like it's going to take time and effort and energy to keep that false grip when you're going through all those repetitions. So I think that's a great topic. And yeah, absolutely. Something that, again, any high level athlete is going to come across at some point, whether they want to or not, or whether they believe it's the right way or not.
Like a quick fix, like, because I was thinking, it's like or not a quick fix, but it's like, hey, I want to muscle up. Like, what's the fastest way that I can get one? And so people are like, oh, do false grip. It's easier. And I think that's why handstands, like, people are so inefficient, because they're like, oh, I want a handstand walk. So they do these ugly, like, scorpion bent knees, like head out. And it's just atrocious, and they break down so much faster because they never learned like a beautiful correct handstand position. And I think that goes almost like all movements. They want to get fast, that they're willing to sacrifice so many like good technical and like foundation parts to the movement.
Oh yeah, for sure. And in the handstand walking scenario, it's basically what I say is that handstand walk where person's body is all over the place unintentionally is just an eventual fall. They're just preventing a fall. They're not actually walking, they're just preventing a fall. And if you're super strong, you can prevent the fall longer.
Yeah.
which means you can stay on your hands longer, but you're not actually handstand walking under control. You're just preventing a fall longer. So there's a big distinction between those.
Yeah. People are always asking like, oh, you have such a straight body, but you bend your knees. And I'm like, I only bend my knees because it's easier on, like, it's just like easier. It's lazy, but I could do the same thing with my legs straight. Like,
yeah. That again, hugely important point. Whenever I'm working with someone who has a similar question, because it gets brought up a lot, they'll watch you at semis or they'll watch you at the games and they'll see your body position. You'll think that that's the way that she knows how to do it. That's the best way to do it. It's always important to note that just because a particular athlete is doing it that way doesn't mean they're doing it that way on purpose, one, or they might be doing it that way because of a particular reason. So it's always important to ask more questions as an athlete. It's always important to kind of say, why is that happening? Is it happening unintentionally, or is there purpose behind it? So you having a gymnastics background that's capable of doing a nice line, my assumption would be that you're bending your knees, one, to create less fatigue in the muscles that are not being used. Exactly. But also you bend your knees, it throws your weight more in that direction, which can create more speed. Right. So there is intention to a bend from someone of your background that understands kind of what's going on. So for listeners out there, ask more questions when it comes to what you're seeing elite athletes do. Don't just mimic, because there could be some inefficiencies for someone that's just doing it because they don't know any better.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, sorry for the rants. For the rants.
It's about having options. It's what we talk about all the time. Be capable of the, position and movement of greatest potential. Be capable of what is ideal, and then you're going to have more options. You can easily come off of that and adjust that a little bit and be able to do it better, more effectively. But if you're only training it one way, which is at least, or even somewhat modified, then you're extremely limited.
I was, we had Bethany on not that long ago, and Bethany, we had a lot of conversation about the amount of accessory work that she does. And it's kind of like, I think it's known within the community that she's great, because it's something that we preach all the time, the importance of accessory work, body prep, especially start to get a little bit older, it starts to become a little bit more important. I'm curious if you've implemented anything you've learned from her in terms of, warm-up routines, things that you've changed in terms of your approach, or do you have kind of a set routine that you use right now, even as you start your mid-20s now, you're a veteran, you use the same techniques that you were using in terms of prep that you used when you were a little bit younger?
So I definitely, when I first started CrossFit, and a lot of the things that I did, I kind of would never warm up. Like, I was like, I don't need to, I feel good. Why would I? Mm-hmm. And I actually ruptured my L4-L5, and I was like, and I would still try to get away with no warm-ups until I was like, okay, this is actually hindering everything. I would be fine, but then a week, I'd have to take like a week off from squatting, deadlifting, everything that hurt it, even biking, running, stuff like that. So I was like, okay, how do I like get rid of this? And I started doing just an obnoxious amount of accessory work before I started my sessions, and I felt better. So I'm glad this injury happened, kind of, because it really set me up for a good routine. And I always do, I always warm up now and always do accessory work. Not as much as Bethany, but I know that it's a great primer for everything. So I still am able to get away with maybe not warming up some things. Like if we have muscle ups, I'm like, I don't need to do a muscle up. My shoulders, I'm good. But ultimately, whenever we're lifting heavy or doing anything like that, I always do accessory work and a good warm up. And I'll go back and look at Bethany's Instagram, and I'm like, oh, I like that. So definitely.
I love that you have her in the gym. You still go back and look at her Instagram and be like, that's better.
Yeah.
It's a better resource than the actual person.
Yeah.
I don't warm up for muscle ups either. But the only reason is because I don't want to waste any. Like if I do two muscle ups for my warm up, that's two less than I'm going to get in the workout. So I can't warm up.
Always thinking.
Absolutely. I'm an efficient weightlifter. It's about efficiency and saving myself, doing what needs to be done. One of the things that I notice on your IG page, and Bethany does this as well, and not necessarily to talk about really the company that I think you're involved in. I mean, we can throw out that name, but the concept of toe spacers, or Correct Toes is another company. Yep, you got them on right now. I've got a pair as well, and I've been playing around with them, and I love the idea. I'm learning more about it. What is your take on those? And just to explain before you get started in that, exactly what it is, what the device kind of looks like, and what you like about it. Why do you use them?
So I think from like a simple explanation, it's kind of crazy if you look at side by side pictures of what shoes really do to our feet. And they're kind of cramming our toes, forming, I think the biggest thing is bunions. I feel like that's how this product kind of started, is people had these bunions because of cramming our feet into these shoes. But ultimately everything does start from the ground up, right? I think a lot of imbalances in how people walk and like knee issues, hip issues comes from our feet and how we stand, how we do movement, right? Ankle injuries, it all starts down there and it'll work its way up, right? Like I think a lot of people with back issues don't realize that maybe it's because of their ankle injury and how they've been walking and compensating because of that injury, and how it just like ultimately affects everything. It's like a chain, you know? I love that. I started working with them because of Bethany. I was like, hey, like she's doing this thing. And I do have a lot of imbalances with my back and my hips. And I do have a bad ankle. So I just use them in the morning. I really like the rock mat. It really gets everything kind of stimulated, which is, it's a really cool tool. But yeah, I've been working with them for a little bit now. I love it. I think it's a super easy tool to prevent a lot of those things, to prevent some injuries.
For sure, for sure. And now Dave might disagree with you. He might think that everything starts from the hands up, which he might be right if we're talking about handstands.
Doing handstands, absolutely.
But we are on our feet, and especially with lifting, obviously, and most everything else that we do, everything starts from the ground, meaning your feet, and working up through your body. And so basically these spacers, it's one piece for each foot, and they just, very slim, maybe like, what would you say, 2 or 3 millimeters thick. They go in between each toe. So four spots to go in between each toe, and they just help spread your toes apart, where again, we get so used to wearing shoes all the time, and it's bunches everything up together. And if you can think about someone that's worn high heels for many, many years, they've got a double whammy of those toes being scrunched together and up on their toes. And so, yeah, it's something for you guys to check out for sure. Again, I'm not trying to promote any certain company or anything, but just something I come across recently, and Danielle saw that you were using as well. So interested to hear your take on it. But I think it's something that's going to potentially be seen more and more, and probably help a lot of people for sure. And I think a big thing is we just got to get out of our shoes more often, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
That's spoken like a gymnast, man. We don't wear shoes ever. So Chad, I think we're switching you slowly to recognizing how amazing the gymnastics world is. No shoes.
No, I know.
Take the lifters off.
Yeah, absolutely. I know how amazing the gymnastics world is, in spite of having you in there, Dave, in spite of that.
Yeah, I'm the one downside to the whole community, I'm aware. But you're talking about toes and things like that. Obviously, when we're talking about handstands, I'm always telling people to spread their fingers out fairly wide to be able to kind of help control the ground.
Yep.
Chad, I've heard you talk about, gripping your toes into the ground too, when you're doing a lift, to kind of help manage and help get more of a full foot engagement whenever you're doing a particular lift. Do you find that this is something that could help with that, to kind of spread the toes out a little bit so you can actually use the toes a little bit more when gripping down into the ground with a lift, to kind of anchoring yourself?
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's easy to use the cue of grip the floor with your toes, but the more because I'm always trying to coach people with their shoes off, not all the time, but just in their warm-ups. And I want to see what their feet are doing outside of their weightlifting shoes, so I can better help them, because again, everything starts from the ground up. But what I notice when I say grip the floor with your toes, a lot of athletes, their toes are bunched together, and some of their toes are all curled up and doing some crazy things. So that's not necessarily something I want to reinforce, or a position of the foot that I want to teach. So I'm trying to get them, yes, with their toes down, but to be sure that they have a tripod foot, meaning they have even distribution on the base or on their heel. the base of their big toe and the base of their little toe. So that's first and foremost. And then from there, we need to solidify the best toe position that we can. And I absolutely, with what little time I've been playing with these, I actually have correct toes. I've been playing with these. It's less about them gripping the floor with their toes, and it's more about them actually spreading them apart as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that the correct toes or any toe spacer can help you with, because now you're going to have your toes solid on the ground with them spread apart, especially if you're someone that's used to them being scrunched together. I think that a lot of athletes, even just wearing them to walk around for say 5 or 10 minutes a day, because that's basically all I started with. Luckily my toes are pretty good in regards to they're not really scrunched together too much. I go barefoot a lot, so they are a little bit more open than I think a lot of people's will be. But I think a lot of athletes that do have this a major limitation here, I think even just wearing them around for 5 to 10 minutes, they're probably going to be sore in places that they've never been sore in. And Danielle, tell me what your thoughts are about that. Did you find yourself, for example, on my right foot, because I was born with a club foot, and this went away pretty quickly, but like after the first week of wearing them for 5 or 10 minutes a day, I noticed my right arch was pretty sore. Did you feel any other part of your body, your feet or your legs, when you first started wearing them?
I just like literally like my toes were sore. But I do have my right ankle is like very unstable. So I noticed like when I used to walk and I still do, like it hasn't completely corrected it, but the way I would walk on my right side because of my ankle, I would walk like more funny. But now just that the toe spacers bring more awareness to like what my toes are doing on the ground and how they feel. So it's definitely helped the stability in that right ankle and on that side. And it's changed the way I walk a little bit. Just because, I didn't have awareness of what my big toe was doing. But it's not too bad because I do walk around barefoot a lot more than I think normal people, or just more than athletes do. I'm always wearing either slides or barefoot. But yeah, it brought a lot more awareness to that ankle injury, which I think a lot of people deal with. A lot of people struggle with this ankle and knee injuries. So I think it's important just for that, the awareness of your feet. And I think it's a great point. I think a lot of people think, oh, stay on your heels. And they forget about like the even distribution of like, no, actually you do need to use like your toes. Like that's, you want to push through your whole foot, not just.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's really good to hear that something like that has helped you in the way that it does. But Dave, when I first saw these and started playing with them and then started understanding more that I actually need to get people to spread their toes as opposed to just gripping the ground. I mean, first thing I thought of was you teaching, talking about opening your hands up with the handstand. And so I was like, a light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, if we do need to do that with our hands, it makes so much sense. You have a bigger base. You're more stable if you're holding a plank or doing push-ups or doing handstand push-ups or handstand hold. Why wouldn't the same be true for your feet as well?
You're welcome, Chad. You're welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're welcome to handstands and my teachings to you.
Oh yeah, you're always helping my lifting. I mean, that's the only reason I know how to squat as well as I do is from Dave's gymnastics teaching. That's all it is.
You keep telling people that too. That'd be great. You mentioned these injuries, with your ankle and your knee, but specifically your back. You said you had ruptured your L4 and L5. How did that happen, and how long ago?
So when I was in high school, and I was doing track, and then I did a little bit of like high school gymnastics for fun. Randomly, I would do like front tumbling a lot, and I would just like, I don't know, I was just like
not in the gym, like out in the fields and
like
track and stuff.
In the gym, yeah. And then my back would just hurt really bad, and then I didn't know what was going on, and then I think I went to CrossFit one day, did a deadlift, and it just like I just like couldn't walk. And this was my senior year of high school. And it was right before going to college for track and field. So I was like, oh no, I hurt myself CrossFit, not even the sport that I'm going to college for on a scholarship. So went to the chiropractor, we did, we figured it out, ruptured, and then just went to the chiropractor like 2 to 3 times a week just so I could get to college, and then got to college. And it caused a lot of issues with pole vault just because you're jamming your back into the ground. So I had a lot of like SI pain, and just had to it was kind of one of those injuries where it's there. I now have to figure out a way to manage it. It's just for chronic pain. Nothing I could do about it. So that's when the accessory work, I was like, okay,
right.
Like that made it manageable. Like that made it to where I could do stuff. A lot of single leg work and just posterior chain and core work. So yeah, but now, I mean, it doesn't affect me a lot. I haven't had a bad flare up since actually rogue competition. I had a really bad flare up just because I don't know why. I just was overtraining and not recovering enough. So, but it's much better. So.
All right. It's good to hear. It's good to hear. I didn't know if it would be something that happened fairly recently or not, but it sounds like it's just about managing now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we are very much looking forward to your participation in the games in a couple of weeks, and not just you, but the rest of the girls are going to be by your side and your teammates, and to see how it all turns out. And, we told both Kari and Bethany that we wanted to have you guys out at camp in the future, and hopefully you come to our Power Monkey camp. I think having you guys all out with us would be amazing. I think you guys would love it, but the campers would get a kick out of having you guys all out there together as well. So the invite is open to have you out after your upcoming success that you guys will have, I'm sure, in a couple of weeks. So good luck in Madison. We're going to be following and cheering you along. But before we jump off the podcast, a couple of quick questions before we get you out. Is that cool? Kind of rapid fire. First one is, I know the answer already, so we're just going to move on. Weightlifting or gymnastics? Which sport or discipline you prefer?
Gymnastics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chad, I don't know, man.
I think this is just proof that you purposely recruit the people that are going to. Although a couple times they've said weightlifting when you thought it was going to be gymnastics.
That's true. That's true. It doesn't happen that often, but I'm still. I guess just because I assist with the recruiting of the guests that. You need to jump on board a little bit more with that. But thank you, Danielle, for another check in my gymnastics box.
Well, at least tell me what your thoughts of Olympic lifting are now that you've been in CrossFit.
You got to make them feel a little bit better.
Is it something that you were doing for track and field, or were you only introduced to that through CrossFit?
I was doing it in high school because I did a advanced PE class or whatever. I love both, but I was in my head, the thought process, I was ultimately, what could I spend an hour doing and enjoy it? And it would be gymnastics. It was a tough one. I love both, but gymnastics, there's just more of it. I don't
Thank you for making Chad feel a little bit better about the
answer.
Yeah,
you did. I appreciate it. I'll take that. I'll take it.
Cool.
Question number 2. Is there any guest that you think we should have on the podcast that would be a good one for us to interview?
Oh, what's his name? Saxon Panchik.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's fun. Have you had him on?
We have not. We have not had Saxon on yet, but we had Saxon's coach on, and he's a good friend of ours. So I'm sure we could have Saxon on pretty soon. Facundo.
John Sweeney.
Okay. Yeah.
He's a good, funny.
All right.
He
seems to have a blast every time he's in a competition. He's just the life of the party.
And really easy to talk to.
All right. Awesome.
Talk your ear off.
Perfect.
Yeah, those are a couple really good recommendations there. How about books? Are you a book reader? Anything you've come across recently you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah. I wish I could remember the names, and I'm moving, so I moved them away from my bed. It's a book by Russell Wilson. It's a mental help book, kind of his perspective and how, I think it's Russell Wilson. Oh my gosh. My, Jason, my manager, sent it to me. So that's a good one. It's his perspective on how he has built up his mental game, not just his physical game, but how he approaches games from a mental standpoint. And then I want to say it's 12 lessons of life. I can't remember who it's by, but I just started reading that one. It's a very hard read, but it's really good so far. It's like 12 lessons of life, or 12 rules to live by, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. We'll have to add that to the list for sure. We've got a long, long list of books for people out there, and hopefully.
Right now.
What's that?
Yeah. Those are the two that I'm reading right now. So.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Danielle, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, to get to know you a little bit. Hopefully we can get you out to Power Monkey Camp at some point. Anything that you've got coming up you want folks to know about other than the games, where can they keep up with you?
We just have the games, and then I think that's it. And then after that, I don't know. I need to figure out what to do, how to stay out of the gym, basically.
I love it that you're just taking it one step at a time. There's no need to look beyond the games right now. That's perfect. I love it. You know, we wish you the best of luck. And to our listeners out there, join us in watching Danielle and all of the other ones and cheering them on. Looking forward to that for sure. Also, guys, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also, check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.